TNA Emergence took place on Friday, August the 15th. So we're going to talk about this show because I'm one of the few people who still talks about TNA. And I only talk about the pay-per-views and special events that occur. So we're going to get into this. We're also going to look into some things that Gail Kim said on Twitter about the rumors floating about on TNA. We'll talk about that and all of Gail's thoughts at the end, however. We're going to get into this show. It was a solid 5.5 in terms of show. But, I mean, they can't all be stars. The main event was pretty solid, though. But the first match was very good. Cedric Alexander takes an L to Leon Slater for the X Division Championship. Cedric Alexander, still pretty new to TNA, and he's lost pretty much both of the major matches that he was in. I don't know how long this is going to go on, but he had a really good one here with Leon Slater. There's a problem here is that both Cedric and Leon are baby faces. So Cedric had to work being the strong guy in the match because, you know, he's the bigger guy and he's the older guy and the veteran. So he basically was throwing around Leon Slater. He hit him with like 3 German suplexes in a row, which was pretty good. The biggest spot in the match came from Leon Slater countering a superplex that he was about to get into a corkscrew plex, which was pretty damn sweet. From there, he tried a Swanton 450 that was countered. That was pretty good. The finish was the Styles Clash into the Swanton 450 pin for Leon Slater. Very, very good opener. Match of the night as far as I'm concerned. They had a post-match handshake, which is probably one too many of those on this show. But, hey, this is a filler show just for TNA+. Mustafa Ali took an L to Matt Cardona. Matt Cardona isn't really a TNA talent. He shows up every once in a while. He's not a regular. But Mustafa Ali is pretty regular. This match was, it features Zack Ryder, so there's not much you can do in that response, you know. But the finish was pretty ridiculous. Mustafa Ali hits his finisher, which is the 450 splash. He has Matt Cardona pinned, but Matt Cardona counters the pin into a crucifix and wins the match that way. So they pretty much buried Mustafa Ali's finisher. Very unfortunate for him. Mustafa Ali is a guy who, when they're done with Trick Williams, they should be maneuvering him towards the main event because he is essentially the top heel on the show outside of Trick Williams at First Class. Matt Cardona is barely there. After the match, Mustafa Ali and his group was called the Order 4. They jumped Matt Cardona and beat him up. And then the System, which includes Brian Myers and Eddie Edwards, 2 terrible pro wrestlers that I don't want to see, they came out to help Matt Cardona. It makes sense because, you know, of course, Cardona and Brian Myers are best buds forever. But the System had a match against First Class. So First Class comes out. First Class is AJ Francis and Rich Swann, Rich Swann was actually in the First Class originally. Then he got suspended with the whole drunken, going to the wrong house kind of thing. And he was replaced with KC Navarro. KC Navarro is tremendous. He's very good. JC Navarro recently got injured. They said it was a knee injury or ACL or something like that. So they wrote him out of the story as being kicked out of First Class and being replaced with Rich Swann, who is back in the group now. So KC Navarro, instead of expanding the group to keep KC Navarro in it, they kicked him out, which, you know, was good heel heat, but I would have liked for them to run as a 3-man group. Anyway, First Class defeated the System. The less said about this, the better, because I don't care about anybody in this match. AJ Francis is indeed funny, though. I'm warming up to him as a heel. He's doing a good job. I'm not warming up to him as a wrestler, but as a shit talker, he works. Rich Swann, of course, is the workhorse of the team. I've never been a big Rich Swann guy. He's not terrible, but he's not great either. I'm kind of on the fence about Rich Swann, but the other 2 guys, fuck them. Who cares about Eddie Edwards, and Brian Myers. I mean, really, who gives a shit? The next match was interesting. Mike Santana versus Sammy Callahan, in a match that if Sammy Callahan loses, he has to retire. Now, I've watched every episode of Impact, and I still don't know how we got here. Okay? I would probably have to go back and watch more episodes, but the thing is, people have been talking down to Sammy Callahan. Apparently he works backstage doing something or other, how he ain't got it anymore and all this sort of stuff. So he was considering retirement and challenged Mike Santana, who he says is the best in the business and the best in the company, or the best in the business, however that went. And if he can't beat him, he's going to retire. That was the storyline going into the match. So before the match starts, he asked Santana for a street fight and said that if it's going to be his last match, he wants to go out the way he's always, fought, which is no holds barred. Santana agreed with that, and then they went on to have probably the most tame Sammy Callahan match humanly possible. But Mike Santana won the match, which means Fat Foot Warthog Sammy Callahan has to retire. This was great. Not the match, but the outcome. Mike Santana being the guy who retires Sammy Callahan. Hopefully this isn't a work and Callahan comes back. Hopefully this is absolutely a 100% shoot. Hopefully like Feast or Fire, where he really gets his walking paper. As soon as he comes to the back, they say, get out of here, you're retired. And when we mean retired, we don't mean you go get to be a producer. You mean you go produce warts like you usually do and get the fuck out of here. Santana wins. Good. A lot of performative claps and handshakes after the match as this guy rolls around on the mat trying to kick his shoes off. I mean, Sammy Callahan is so fat. He is so penguinish that he can barely get off his shoes, which makes the question, how could he get them on? So he left his boots in the ring. Praise God. He goes to the backstage area where there's a huge thank you Sammy chant. They should get fucked. I understand he's the world champion. He was ride or die for TNA for a long time, but this guy sucks. All right, he's trash. He's shaking some hands, he gets some back slaps, and then Eric Young appears and got in his face and called all of this fake, and that these people don't really care about Sammy Callahan. Joe Hendry got in Eric Young's face and told him to back off, and Joe Hendry blamed all of this on Joe Hendry anyway. And by all of this, I don't know what he meant. I'm going to assume the fact that TNA's championship is in the hands of NXT, which only certain people seem to care about. Very few characters seem to care about this. I think Eric Young is one of those characters. I don't pay attention a lot to Eric Young. I don't pay a lot of attention to Sammy Callahan. So I just don't like these guys, so I don't pay a lot of attention to them. But I'm guessing that's what he's going on about here. Next was the Knockouts Tag Team Championships, the Fatal 4-Way match. Xia Brookside and Yaling Yi, the By Elegance brand, Fatal Influence, and The Inspiration. Before the tag team title match, they decided to have a very weird event where Lei Ying Lee re-signed with TNA before the match started. I don't know why. Why did they do that? It seemed completely out of place. But they did it. On Impact, there was a summit featuring these four teams where Fallon Henley said that NXT was the superior brand to TNA, which got minor traction on social media, basically because a TNA wrestler had to listen to an NXT wrestler talk about how much better NXT was. Of course, she was a heel, and she got booed for that comment, by the way, which goes to show that the fans there are not just there for NXT, they're also there for TNA. So, I mean, it wasn't like people cheered when she said that. And she was a heel, and being a heel, and NXT is the heel in this situation. I guess people didn't realize that. This match was fine. It wasn't terrible. It also wasn't great. There was a breakdown in the middle of the match with each team except one having a second. So the By Elegance brand is 3 people. There's Ash with Dana Brooke, and then there's M, and then there's, I forgot the other girl's name. I fucking forgot. Never mind. But Xia Brookside and Xia Li, okay? They're a tag team, but Masha Slamovich is hanging out with them. And of course, Fatal Influence has JC Jane. So JC Jane, of course, was getting involved in the match. Oh, I forgot. The Inspiration had Mara Sade, who is Jakara Jackson. She's new to TNA, and she was around the ring for something. She didn't come out with the Inspiration, but she came out later. So it ended up being this gigantic brawl in the middle of the match where JC Jane was getting beat up by all these various contenders. She's being chased around by Mara Sade and Masha Slamovich and Ash by Elegance. They're all trying to attack her and beat her up, and she's like running about in the middle of the ring. It was really ridiculous because it's the middle of a different match. And then, of course, the referee ejects everybody, and the match continues with M by Elegance hitting Cassie in the head with a championship and then pinning her. So the By Elegance brand won. My feelings about that is, okay, the By Elegance brand are being pushed as sort of the top heel faction on the girls part of TNA. So it makes sense that they would win. And I am not surprised that they won. I thought maybe Fatal Influence would win, but it makes sense for them not to win. And Ash by Elegance, of course, is a heel chasing the Knockouts Championship. But they're going to do something with Jakara Jackson because she actually went to TNA and actually started showing out. She has been doing good there. I haven't heard a promo, but when it comes to wrestling, she's actually been decent, you know? So maybe she'll get the push that they have set aside for Indy Hartwell. Indy Hartwell is terrible. She had a terrible match with Rosemary on the pre-show. She can't even talk. All right, Indy Hartwell is not good. All right, not good at all. Period. Not good. Next, international title. Steve Macklin defeats Jake Something. This was very solid. Jake Something. I keep looking at this guy. We've been saying it for 3 or 4 or 5 years. What is TNA waiting for when it comes to Jake Something? Macklin's clearly TNA's guy. You know, this match was no disqualification. It was watered down because they had a no DQ match just 2 matches ago with Callahan and Santana. This one was better than Callahan and Santana because it was 2 heavyweight guys wrestling like a heavyweight match. Both guys are fit. They're both in shape. I'm not a big Steve Macklin guy, but 2 heavy hitters going in there and laying the leather is pretty good. Jake Something power bombs Mike Macklin on the stairs. He also countered the Tree of Woe spear, which is where Macklin hangs people upside down. Then he'll run from one side of the ring to the other and spear them in the stomach. I think it's called the crossfire is what they call it or something like that. But he countered it into a guillotine choke, which I thought was pretty sweet. And it wasn't the finish. I would have thought you would do something like that. It would be the finish, but of course not. Anyway, Steve Macklin wins with his finisher, the double arm DDT, which is called the KIA or the Killed in Action. Commentary was Kazarian all night chirping in everybody's ear. He was distracting both guys. After the match, Macklin put over Jake Something and said that he was actually worth something. Then Kazarian started yapping in Macklin's face, and then Macklin challenged him to fight right now, and of course Kazarian backed off. Kazarian is one of those guys that I think is absolutely holding back TNA. Alright? Absolutely holding TNA back. He needs to go away. Alright? He needs to go bye-bye. Match number 6. The Hardys defeated the Rascals. Again, both baby faces. The match was solid. Myron Reed has filled in for Trey Miguel. Myron Reed is a member of the Rascals. He's never really used that much, and he's also quite good. I feel like I'm introducing people to Myron Reed for the first time every time I talk about him, because outside of the indies, he really doesn't do anything. He hasn't made any appearances on WWE. I think he might have made some shock appearances on WWE, like a run-in or something, but nothing major. And I don't think he'd even gotten a shot at AEW yet. But he's, of course, was a guy who was in MLW for a long time. He's probably still there. He popped up in MLW, not the most recent show, but I think the show before last. Maybe he's still there, and that's why he's not been on NXT or Ring of Honor or something like that. But He's pretty good. And the Hardy Boys just beat him. Clearly, the Hardys are not in their physical prime, and it's just the Rascals bouncing around for the Hardys and then doing flashy moves. But that's all you really need to do when it comes to the Hardys. It was pretty sweet that Jeff was able to counter one of Myron Reed's really over-the-top cutters when he jumps over the top rope. That was a nutty move. Jeff kind of botched the counter, but he also countered it, so it was okay. In the main event, Trick Williams defeated Moose. This was really good. Moose is not my favorite, but he is a competent pro wrestler that can be quite good at times. He had a really good match with Leon Slater at the last go-round, and he got a pretty good one out of Trick Williams, too. Trick Williams is really coming into his own in TNA. The crowd loves him. 2,000 people in unison. That's how many people they got into this building, which is more than most Dynamites. Not more than most TNA AEW pay-per-views, but certainly more than most Dynamites. They got 2,000 people chanting, "Whoop that Trick," and in unison, with energy, with enthusiasm. All right? These people were extremely happy to see Trick Williams. Trick Williams is doing a really good job of hanging out with First Class and getting these guys over too, and giving them, I don't want to say the rub, but he is technically a bigger star than they are, so I guess he is giving them the rub. But the match itself was pretty damn good. The crowd was chanting for Trick Williams and chanting "Whoop that Trick," of course. So he had to try to get some heat. So before the match started, he said that both him and Moose are NFL guys, but the only real birds in the NFL are the Eagles. And, of course, it explained later that Trick Williams was actually on the practice squad or something like that for the Philadelphia Eagles. And that was just used to get some heat. It failed because they were still chanting for Trick during the match. Trick was mocking the Moose fist pump thing, and they was like, "Trick." And it was really good. And they did like a back and forth where Moose would do it, and the people who are pro Moose would chant Moose, and then the people would do Trick. And they're doing the fist pump back and forth. It was pretty good. Moose got dropped onto the announce desk, which of course took the match to the next level. There was a ref bump, inexplicable ref bumps in the main event. Moose hit a spear on Trick Williams, but there was no referee. When a new referee comes in, Trick Williams kicks out. Trick Williams ends up hitting the trick shot to the back of the shoulder of Moose. He didn't jump high enough to get him in the head, but we're not supposed to recognize that. And then when Moose got up, he hit the trick shot to his face and pinned him. So Trick Williams wins, and Carlos Silva is forced to handle the TNA World Championship and give it to Trick Williams once again. So that was the end of the pay-per-view. Nothing special at the end of the show, except it was announced that they were going to have some kind of announcement on Impact this week. We don't know what that's going to be. I guess we're going to have to figure it out. But I got to say, the show, it was about 3 or 4 matches on the show out of 6 that I thought were pretty watchable. The first match, Cedric Alexander versus Leon Slater, very watchable match. The Steve Macklin versus Jake Something match in the main event. So 3 out of the... if you into the Hardy Boys in 2025, then that match with the Rascals is as good as it's going to get. And the Hardy Boys are pretty consistent, but they're not amazing anymore. Obviously they're just older, more washed guys than they used to be. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Gail Kim. So Gail wanted to know what fans thought of all the rumors about TNA. And she says that, I'm going to not read verbatim what she says, but she said that she's been saying for 2 years that TNA needs a better creative team and that the leadership isn't giving the wrestlers the appropriate environment where they want to stay and be loyal, but leadership is okay with wrestlers leaving. This is, I think, a mischaracterization of what is occurring here. What has occurred is that leadership forced out Scott D'Amore, and Scott D'Amore, much like any other insurgent, had put his own people in place in TNA. Because, of course, he wanted to buy the company, so he had pretty much restructured the inside of the company to be more of what he wanted. Once he left, a bunch of people who basically owe their careers to Scott D'Amore, their push, their or whatever, they left with him as soon as they could. Quite a few of these people ended up going to AEW on top of signing with Scott D'Amore's Maple Leaf Pro. Ace Austin is the most recent one. He left, worked for Maple Leaf Pro, now he's in AEW. Second time it's happened. First time was, of course, Josh Alexander. Left TNA, worked in Maple Leaf Pro, then ended up in AEW. Here's the thing, and this is the God's honest truth. TNA does not have the money to pay guys that are looking for WWE or AEW money. They just don't have it. Okay? That means that talent, even if they wanted to be in TNA, it's bad business for them to be in TNA. People are mocking and laughing at Josh Alexander for being a jobber in AEW, but he's probably being paid more to be a jobber in AEW than he would have been paid to be the main event of TNA. All right? That's just reality at this point. Notice, if you look at the roster of TNA, outside of, well, I can't really say outside of anyone, the people on this roster are people that WWE did not want or do not want anymore, like Indy Hartwell and Mara Sade and Ash by Elegance and Steve Macklin, or people that AEW don't want, like Moose, right? So if neither of the major companies where you can get paid the most money are interested in you, then TNA is where you end up. If you could get out of TNA, then people get out of TNA, typically. But almost everybody that is in TNA are somebody who washed out of NXT or AEW. Or they washed out of NXT and they cannot get out of AEW. Or like Mustafa Ali, like him getting into AEW probably is not a good idea or a good deal right now. When you have that sort of situation, people are not going to be loyal. They can't. It's a business at the end of the day. And these are wrestlers making financial decisions. I think it's unfair to say that the company doesn't care about, the talent leaving because they're not going to foster that sort of environment. They can't afford to pay people for their loyalty. AEW can. WWE can. TNA is an opportunity for some people. And Mara Sade and Indy Hartwell are very smart to go to TNA and get the experience because AEW doesn't want them. And if they were to go to AEW, they would probably get put on the very bottom of Ring of Honor and nobody would really care. But going to TNA, they can get a push, they can get experience, they'll travel, but not a lot. It's the right move. If you don't want to be a bottom feeder in AEW and you can't get back into WWE immediately, then it's a smart move to be in TNA. That being said, however, TNA does need to do better in pushing the young talent that they do have that are sticking around. People like Leon Slater, for instance. They do the right thing by making him the X Division champion and then giving him the platform where he could showcase, okay? Because while all the AEW, they have Kevin Knight, right? Him and Leon Slater are pretty much interchangeable in terms of moveset and abilities, etc., except Leon's younger. WWE has Javon Evans, pretty much interchangeable from Leon Slater and Kevin Knight. Young dude, slim, black, very athletic, not much in the way of personality, but he's even younger than Leon Slater, if I remember correctly. So Leon Slater is pretty much in the beautiful sweet spot when it comes to TNA, where he can go there, get a push, get experience, and not have a whole lot of people ahead of him that's in the way. However, TNA still has so many dinosaurs on their roster. The system, the entirety of it. Eddie Edwards, Moose, Myers, they all need to go. All right? Moose can have good matches, but my God, enough's enough. It's been 10 years or something like that. Then you got Eric Young. And they got rid of Sammy Callahan, great. But Frankie Kazarian is another one. TNA needs to invest in younger talent because AEW is not doing it. All of their top guys are in their 30s and 40s. WWE certainly isn't doing it. And so TNA is the opportunity for, if you're a young talent, to get a push. to get a look, to find out who you are and what you are, and to make the most of it. And I think that with that comes the downside of you're not going to get paid as much, but you may get set up for something in the future. So it depends a hell of a lot on how you need money right now, you know? So I think that she was being unfair. I mean, it's true what she's saying, but it's unfair because they simply don't have the money. Now, if they do end up on some network and they get $10 million a year or something like that, they may be able to get a little bit more competitive when it comes to free agents. They may be able to get more competitive in terms of wanting to bring in more indie wrestlers, wanting to bring in more legends and stuff like that. But as of right now, trying to get people to watch TNA when Moose is in featured matches, Brian Myers is in featured matches, Matt Cardona is in featured matches, that's going to be hard. You know, that's going to be difficult. If you had more Leon Slaters, more Mara Shadés, more Masha Slamoviches, it would probably be easier to get people to watch TNA. But they don't. So they gotta do some rebuilding. So hopefully whoever buys it or whoever invests in the company, they use that money correctly. All right, so I give the show a solid 5.5. Talk to you guys later. Be blessed.
No one does it better.